birthplace of the Renaissance and a magnet for art lovers from all over the world. It's a city studded with sublime treasures. On every street, churches and palaces proclaim the legacy of Giotto, Leonardo da Vinci, Donatello, and Michelangelo. At the 15th century Palazzo Strozzi, a landmark exhibition is in preparation. But the subject isn't Leonardo or Botticelli or Vasari or any of the other household names that usually pull in the exhibition crowds. It's Agnolo Bronzino, a now largely unknown painter of the late Florentine Renaissance.
In his own time, he was considered one of the greatest artists going. He was a great court painter.
In Florence, he is known as the first great poetic court artist.
Bronzino is special because he's a quirky artist. He's so odd. And you look at him expecting space to recede in a rational way, and it doesn't. You look at him and you expect meaning to be right there on the surface the way it is, for example, in most earlier Renaissance artists. And actually, the meaning is quite elusive.
He really was an astonishing artist, and clearly one of the two most gifted portraitists of the 16th century, and that he made of portraiture an art that it practically had not been before his time.
Over the centuries, many of Bronzino's paintings have been overlooked, lost or neglected. But some of his damaged paintings are being restored for the new exhibition, and they're providing a few surprises. There's a new Renaissance in Florence, and it's bringing Bronzino out of the shadows. There's a buzz of excitement in the heart of Florence, an emphasis on the rediscovery of the city's heritage, and a new determination to share forgotten treasures with its visitors. The decision to hold a major exhibition of the work of Agnolo Bronzino is just one sign of this movement. One of the key figures behind the new Renaissance is Leonardo Ferragamo.
I think that in Florence we are starting to breathe a new air. There is a new atmosphere in the city. This exhibition of Bronzino is going to be the most important one, the best that has ever been done anywhere else. And it's going to once more highlight the importance of our city as a cultural center, but it is looking forward.
Art historians agree that Bronzino was a master, somehow eclipsed by history. For Florentines, that's a situation they're determined to change.
One of the reasons that is very dear to me is the idea that through it, Florence and its international visitors will discover a star. Bronzino is well known to art insiders, yet not so popular with the average visitor of museums and churches, who will now have an opportunity to discover a great protagonist of the Renaissance.
James Bradburn is Director General of the Palazzo Strozzi, host to the exhibition.
Bronzino, like every exhibition we've done, Bronzino allows us, in re-evaluating this fabulous artist, to create a moment, a very synthetic moment, where people encounter Bronzino maybe for the first time in different ways than they might have seen him in fragments in different museums in the world.
So who was this mysterious figure, so admired by artists, yet somehow overlooked for centuries? His real name was Agnolo di Cosimo di Mariano. We don't know for sure why he was called Bronzino, although it is said that it was because of his auburn hair. Only a handful of portraits exist, 1 as a child and 3 as an older man, so we have no idea how he looked in his prime. What we do know is that Bronzino was born in Florence in 1503, the son of a butcher. It was a time dominated by war, famine, and plagues. He grew up against a backdrop of religious and political unrest, as successive power struggles divided states and cities. These years saw the ultimate restoration of the Medici family as rulers of Florence and beyond. Their wealth and position was to influence not only Bronzino's future, but the artistic life of the city until the latter part of the century. Yet despite the restless political scene, it would be hard to overestimate the richness of the artistic environment of 16th century Florence. The city led the world, producing great masterpieces and great masters from a seemingly endless fount of creativity. Bronzino was sent to be an artist's apprentice at the age of 8. 2 or 3 years later, he entered the prestigious studio of Jacopo Carucci da Pontorme, who had earlier studied with Leonardo da Vinci. Pontormo, already established as one of Florence's leading artists, became Bronzino's teacher and mentor. He pictured the young Bronzino in his Egypt painting. Antonio Natali, director of the Uffizi Gallery, is co-curator of the Bronzino exhibition.
Bronzino's relationship with Pontormo was like father and son. Pontormo had mental problems. We seem to be afraid to talk about these issues, as it seems like art historians always want to change what has been said in the past. I'm not afraid to say that Pontormo suffered from depression. He was claustrophobic, agoraphobic. Bronzino was one of the very few people who was allowed to go to his house. Pontormo would drop a cord ladder to let him in. Pontormo was a troubled man, but from my point of view, one of the greatest artists of all time.
The early 1500s in Florence were marred by epidemics of plague. To escape one particularly severe outbreak, Pontormo and the 20-year-old Bronzino fled to the sanctuary of the monastery at Certosa, south of the city. Here they lived for 2 years. And in the elegant cloisters, Pontormo, assisted by Bronzino, painted a series of frescoes, 5 stories of the Passion of Christ. It was here, under Pontormo's tutelage, that Bronzino's formidable technique began to emerge. At this stage, it is hard to distinguish between the work of master and pupil, and it is still uncertain how much of the frescoes can be attributed to the emerging Bronzino. Nevertheless, Pontormo is such an important clue to rediscovering Bronzino that one of the Certosa frescoes, The Road to Calvary, is being restored and loaned to the Strozzi exhibition. The restorer, Sabino Giovannoni, comes from a long line of specialists. He knows the Certosa frescoes well.
Because I already knew the restoration and the conservation work done by Dini in 1950 and 51, this gives me an advantage working on the frescoes now.
The frescoes are nearly 5 centuries old, and the years have taken their toll. Before anything else can be done, the fragile surface must be stabilized.
The first stage of the restoring process is to protect the fresco where the paint has come off due to the movement in the structure. I apply Japanese paper and a special adhesive. On the wall you see right in the corner, Pontormo carried out the fresco on which we are now working, the Road to Calvary. It was moved from there to conserve it because it was rapidly decaying.
Once the fresco is off the wall, Sabino can clean and inspect its supporting framework. The move to the exhibition is risky, and the back will have to be reinforced in order to withstand the journey. Finally, the restorers begin work on the fresco itself.
About a month ago, we finished our work on the rear of the support, strengthening the structural parts. Then we proceeded with cleaning the paint surface. At the same time, we did the filling, especially in the top bit of the fresco. Our aesthetic intervention to enhance the original paint is actually giving us some good results, because we've been able to eliminate some abrasion caused by the passing of time. It's about 500 years for this artwork. Taking away this abrasion, we restore the original paintwork.
By the time of the Certosa frescoes, Bronzino had absorbed most of what Pontormo had to teach. But his master's influence on Bronzino extended far beyond tutelage. Pontormo introduced him to the man who would determine the course of his future life, Cosimo de' Medici. As claimants to the highest offices, two of them had become popes and all aspired to political power. The Medici family were much concerned with the outward signs of their position. They emphasized their religious piety through the building and decoration of elaborate churches and chapels. The unmistakable message of power and wealth was transmitted through a lifestyle designed to impress. Sumptuous, richly furnished palaces. The Medici art collections were almost without parallel, in quality as well as quantity. So it was a significant moment when Bronzino emerged from his mentor's shadow to take on his first major court commission. Frescoes to decorate Cosimo's wife Eleonora of Toledo's chapel in the ducal palace. Bronzino's work appealed greatly to Cosimo. He commissioned him to paint a series of family portraits. With their unique style, these were the paintings that confirmed Bronzino's position at the center of the Florentine art world.
He was a court painter. It was the only show in town. There is no question that he was the painter for the greatest and one of the most inspirational courts. The Medici court for 3 generations was at the center of what we now call the Renaissance.
Through his painting, Bronzino not only introduced a new style of portraiture, he created a new role as image maker.
Cosimo saw it as something very important because it would establish his image, both in Florence and indeed abroad. as somebody who was a ruler set apart from his people and powerful and aristocratic. And he obviously saw in Bronzino at a very early age, very soon after he came to power, somebody who was capable of creating that image for him.
We can say that Bronzino created the image of the Medici court, starting with Duke Cosimo I, his wife, the Duchess Eleonora, their sons, and other children at various ages. By doing this, Bronzino has created icons of the Western world of art that are easily recognizable worldwide. The Uffizi, along with the many works of art still exhibited today, was created by the Medici family. Since Bronzino was the core painter and the ultimate portrait artist, many of the works of art come from the Medici collection. Bronzino is deeply linked to the identity of the Uffizi.
Cosimo understands the naturalistic virtuosity of Bronzino and commissioned him to portray all the members of his family.
Non soltanto veritieramente le fisionomie dei personaggi medici.
Bronzino is not only able to replicate the Medici features on canvas, but is also able to interpret their psychology and to adorn these portraits with animations that enhance and make more poetic his painting expression.
Technically, he's an astonishingly brilliant painter, and he doesn't, as it were, let his own feelings come between you and the person he's representing. You feel he's both objective and rather obsessive in what he does. You know, there isn't a thing in a Bronzino portrait that you feel is out of place or should in any way be different.
What set Bronzino apart was his gift for combining elegance, naturalism, and depth to create powerful, engaging portraits. Not only did he accurately reproduce the sitter's features, he interpreted their personality, incorporating subtle messages about character and status. Both his portraits and his larger allegorical works are richly detailed and multi-layered. He was fond of symbolic allusions, perhaps related to the fact that he was known as a poet as well as a painter.
The beauty of Bronzino's work is, above all, what the hidden meanings are behind his artwork. A naked woman with a naked child next to her, it is not just a naked woman with a naked child next to her. It is a Venus with Cupid. The idea is to interpret a painting as you would do a piece of poetry.
Carlo Falciani is one of the curators of the Bronzino exhibition. He's also an expert on the poetry of Bronzino.
Bronzino's poetry in the 16th century in Florence, when he was painting, has a very direct link with the style of Tuscan poetry of the period, which was focused on allegory. It was started by Berni and has its roots in comic and burlesque poetry. Bronzino was recognized as a poet by the court. Many of these poetic themes appear in his paintings. Today, a lot of his poetry would be considered obscene, but at the time they were a part of Florentine culture. Everyone is flesh. No matter how you wash it, or adorn it, or perfume it, it is still flesh, and you will never be able to escape from it.
For Bronzino, his relationship with his patron Cosimo was an ideal one.
Artists are always in search of patrons. They need to live. They need to make money. You need to get in with the rich, particularly if you're an artist like Bronzino, who works, as far as we can see, rather slowly and in a very painstaking way. He's certainly not the sort of person who could turn out bread and butter altarpieces for confraternities and large groups of people. He didn't want to do that kind of picture. What he wanted to do was to have aristocratic patrons who would pay him very well to do very labor-intensive pictures. And that, I think, is, for him, the appeal of Cosimo de' Medici.
Patronage has always been a driving force behind art. He would never have become Bronzino if the Medici were not his patrons. And likewise, I think nowadays we have to look at patronage as a contemporary way of supporting art. Whether you're looking to conservation, preservation, restoration, and most important, to enhance, to inspire new art.
Today, major exhibitions are rarely possible without private support. Bronzino's work has attracted sponsorship from organizations including Bank of America Merrill Lynch, who have contributed to the restoration of his paintings.
The Bronzino project was compelling for us for a number of reasons. First, he's not the household name among Renaissance artists that we believe he deserves to be. Also, as they started to review some of the paintings and x-ray them, they found some very interesting things which we were thrilled about.
The role of entrepreneurs, companies, private individuals that are sensitive to the importance of art, of preservation, but preservation with a forward-looking mentality is fundamental. And I'm proud of being associated with Palazzo Strozzi, and we're all very proud for what Bank of America is doing to support Palazzo Strozzi.
You go to a painting with questions, not just expecting answers. So the restoration, of course, lets you, in the research phase, look under the skin, if you wish, under the surface of the painting. And yes, it's a thrill to discover something that you didn't expect.
Florence is the home of the Opificio delle Pietre Dure, one of the world's leading restoration laboratories. It's here that vital preservation work is carried out.
Restoration is actually one of those wonderful, long-lasting functions of an exhibition. What you have is 10, 20, 30 works that are either in better condition than they were before, have been restored visually, sometimes restored structurally, sometimes they'll hold up on the wall better. An exhibition is not just an excuse to hold an open party to the world. It's a reason to give back to the world masterpieces that otherwise might be sitting in storerooms, might be sitting in non-optimal conditions, might be rotting away somewhere.
All paintings deteriorate over time, obscuring colors and details, and many suffer damage. But conservation is time-consuming and expensive, and as a result, often delayed. Bronzino's mysterious eclipse from international fame has meant that many of his works have been awaiting restoration.
We were shocked at the condition of some of the paintings. In fact, some of them were in a fairly alarming condition. It points up to the need for funding for this type of work, particularly as things are getting older. And now the technology has come so far that there's an opportunity to improve upon what's been done in the past.
Today's conservationists intervene only to repair and preserve, and anything they do must be reversible.
Our lab must be exactly like a hospital for a man. You could need the surgery or not. You cannot say that we don't have to restore never or always the painting. You have to have a first step of exactly understanding which are the problems. If you need also to intervene with a surgical work, because restoration is a surgical work, with all the risk, the danger, exactly like in an hospital.
Florence's Opificio is a mixture of state-of-the-art technology and world-class traditional craftsmanship. The restorers will need all their expertise to deal with their most pressing challenge: 3 Bronzinos urgently needed for the new exhibition. Perhaps the most unusual is the Nano Morgante, Bronzino's portrait of a popular Medici courtier.
Paintings on canvas by Bronzino are extremely rare. This is practically the only certain example of a painting by Bronzino on canvas, even though there may have been more.
There's something else unusual. The painting is double-sided. Actually, two paintings back to back.
The painting was investigated with a variety of methods, both with infrared technology, with infrared reflectography, with X-rays and so forth. And one of the purposes of doing this type of investigation, which we almost always do on the works of art that come into the laboratory, is to investigate the technical details and the making, the evolution of the painting. But in this case, one of the important discoveries was that underneath the overpaint which covered the background of the original on the front of the painting, there was the elements of the original composition, which completely changed the iconography of the painting.
The scans revealed that the painting had been heavily overpainted, presumably for reasons of modesty, during the 18th century, transforming Morgante, originally portrayed as a hunter, into a Bacchus. Armed with this knowledge, the restorers removed the 18th century additions and revealed the original painting beneath.
The butterfly was underneath the overpaint because in the original version, the entire area was covered with grapevines.
The first task was to repair damage to the canvas itself. An intricate, painstaking process.
When you're working on the painting under the microscope, under enlargement, you're able to see all of the technical details, how he uses the brush to produce certain effects, the layers of the color, the nature of the pigments themselves when you do investigation in order to identify them. Because our work is a combination of using your eyes, your hands, and obviously your brain as well. And also the physical unity with the work of art, understanding how this work of art has been made and getting close up to the work of art, touching it. We're in the final stage of restoration at this point. We've filled in the areas where the original color and other material has been lost because of damage after the cleaning and so forth. The phase of what we call in-painting, no longer retouching because it's never on the original itself, but only aimed at filling in the areas of losses of color so that they will recede into the background. This is all original. The small portion of the wing here, including this portion of the flesh, has been filled and reconstructed on the basis of the original.
It's thought that the Morgante was created at a time when artists at the Medici court were debating the virtues of painting versus sculpture. Bronzino was on the side of the painters. With this work, he showed that double-sided pictures could present an image that could be seen from both sides, and could, in addition, show the passage of time. One side shows the dwarf setting off on the hunt, the other him returning with his game. The painting expresses something of the complexity of Bronzino that emerges in his burlesque poetry. Hinted at in other portraits, here it is allowed full reign, as we can finally see in the newly restored painting. Elsewhere in the Opificio, a very different Bronzino work is being prepared for exhibition. It's called Venus, Cupid and Jealousy, lent from Budapest.
I went to Budapest in 2008 to see the painting and check its condition, and I realized there were some problems with the structure in the wooden panel. I couldn't see because it was behind protected glass that the painting had been painted over several times. There were also some problems with the surface of the painting, which was becoming detached. There were some problems with the stability of the color in the previous overpainting, and therefore my job was going to be a lot harder than I envisaged at first.
The lab then carried out its usual tests: X-rays, scans, and analyses. Once again, the tests revealed some surprises. The first was the hidden head of a satyr, subsequently painted over by Bronzino himself. Later, reviewing the X-rays from a different angle, the restorer spotted something else.
Yesterday, something interesting and curious happened. We brought out the X-ray of the painting to have a look at it from a different point of view. We brought it out to see the painting, and we suddenly realized that there was something, another character underneath the heads of the two children. There was a single child in a different position that up to that point nobody has seen.
When people discover new things under paintings using reflectography and X-rays, it's always exciting for the art world because you can learn so much. And one of the basic things you can learn is this the original work of art or is it a copy? And what an X-ray will show you is pedimenti, that the artist changed his mind when he was drawing the figures.
The analysis carried out, especially the reflectography, allows us to see the artist's first ideas. When a painter like Bronzino puts them down on canvas, creating the image with charcoal or pencil, in the preparation for a journey to a final painting. The reflectographies are helpful to understand the creative process. It is always useful to know what is underneath the painting. What is more important is to appreciate the final result without worrying about the underdrawings.
There is so much conservation work to be done that the painting will have to be returned for further restoration after the exhibition. For now, old, darkened restorations are being removed and damage temporarily concealed.
At the moment, I am correcting the old, altered, darkened restorations scattered all over the painting. These problems can be large or rather small, as in this case.
La cosa a cui bisogna stare molto attenti in questa fase
The one thing we have to be very careful about at this stage is to meticulously respect the original painting.
perché ci può essere la tentazione di dare delle
There could be the temptation to add your own interpretation. One must be sure about what you're about to do and be sure what the original painting looked like, so that no alteration should be made to what the painter intended.
The work so far reveals that this painting, typically for Bronzino, incorporates elements both of the grotesque and the allegorical.
I think Bronzino is not deliberately painting puzzles in pictures, but the pictures do have a certain depth, and that's deliberate, so that you can read into them things that you want. Venus as a goddess is rather ambiguous in her powers. She brings about unpleasant feelings, disasters, broken hearts, as well as everything else, and Bronzino was certainly subtle enough to include implications of that in the pictures that he did. He's not a straightforward and positive, optimistic kind of artist who's intending to make you feel more cheerful.
Bronzino's Crucified Christ, loaned to the exhibition from the Museum of Nice, was thought until recently to have been lost. It was commissioned by Bartolomeo and Lucrezia Panciatichi, friends and patrons of Bronzino, and was painted amid the religious controversies surrounding the challenge of Lutheran teachings to the established Church of Rome. It's a powerful piece, but its current condition is poor.
This Bronzino painting arrived here in Italy at our laboratory with some serious paint surface problems. The painting's main problem was its color, which had been altered by several old restorations. They tried to solve some problems of color stability, which kept popping up all over the years.
The
painting appeared completely blurred by a series of layers of paint, which was previously applied. Throughout the years, hundreds of adjustments have somehow darkened or lightened the painting in an attempt to cover the missing paint surfaces. From the moment we analyzed the painting, and after a series of investigations, we understood that before being ready for the exhibition, it needed a gradual and selective clean in order to return to the original look of the painting. So rich in its fantastic and multichromatic use of color, very typical of this artist.
Gradually, the original glowing colors of the Bronzino emerged. But the X-ray, infrared and reflectology scans had revealed something new about the painting. Underneath the surface was a drawn image different to the one Bronzino finally painted.
Christ is initially depicted like a dying man, with all his body weight and the force of gravity pulling him to the ground. This is especially evident in the positioning of his face profile, in the bent knees, in the bent arms. There is a specific way to treat the body. We are at a good point. We are at the final stages of retouching, doing final touches with two of us working on it. And if we continue like this, and don't waste time, we should be able to meet the deadline.
Giorgio Vasari, contemporary and colleague of Bronzino, recorded that the artist had used a real corpse as a model for his crucifixion. The scans seemed to confirm this, and the fact that Bronzino altered his original graphic portrayal to a softer, more idealistic image reflects the religious views of the Panciatichi, who commissioned the painting. Meanwhile, in Milan, there's another Bronzino being readied for the exhibition. Restorer Carlotta Beccaria is in the final stages of work on Bronzino's arresting portrait of Lorenzo Lenzi. This painting, although generally in reasonable condition, has a very specific structural problem.
The wooden surface was spongy because it had been attacked by woodworm. They have basically corroded the rear surface, making the wood structure a lot weaker. The weakness has created some problems in the surface of the painting, as these cracks go through to the woodworm tunnels.
Scans of the painting helped pinpoint the areas of damage as well as changes caused by previous restoration. And once the structural problem was dealt with, the task of restoring the surface could begin.
One of the great golden rules of modern restoration is that any restoration project has to be reversible. The colors that you have seen me using, which I have prepared myself, are extremely reversible. Therefore, in the future, if they will need to be removed, the process could be done with a very bland solvent without causing any problems to the painting. There is always a great deal of excitement and anxiety once we get close to this master's work. We try to take all the possible precautions and make sure that all our interventions are coherent with the artwork itself. The difficult moment is when the artwork leaves the studio rather than the beginning of the project, because after so many months, one doesn't want to let them go. They become like sons to us. The end of the restoration is the difficult moment for us, rather than the beginning.
The cleaning has made clearer the text held in Lorenzo's left hand, poems by Petrarch and Benedetto Varchi. Bronzino liked to introduce pieces of handwritten text into his work, meant to be read as part of the painting's message. In this case, it is thought that the portrait was painted on the eve of the boy's departure from home. It speaks of love and absence, at a time when wars, exile and plague created a constant awareness of mortality and loss. A coolness of mood now accentuated in the restored portrait.
No one has ever tried to do an exhibition of this scope, of this quality, about this artist. And it's once in a lifetime because, in fact, given the qualities alone, given the fact that we have nearly every Bronzino that can move off its wall, I think there are 3 exceptions in the world, we have everything that can come to Florence. And we have the Uffizi that has a huge number of Bronzinos here. This is the home of Bronzino. He's a Florentine artist. This is a show that will not be done for at least another generation. It is a show that's done once, if it's ever done again, because it's just too hard. It will never travel. You cannot imagine the Uffizi ever loaning its entire collection of Bronzinos to New York or Paris or London. It's not going to happen. So it's now or never.
And what I'm hoping for in this exhibition is that we're going to discover a major artist of the mid-Renaissance, Michelangelo's contemporary, who has always been overshadowed by the great Michelangelo, but who is actually the last of the major Renaissance artists.
The restored Pontormo fresco is sent on its way to the exhibition. Quite a challenge for such a large, fragile work. At the Opificio, the crucifixion waits for its last coat of varnish. But the Morgante is ready to go. This is the riskiest part of any exhibition, when priceless paintings are in transit. At Palazzo Strozzi, 82 works are arriving from galleries and museums all over the world. For the larger pieces, there's only one way in. Tapestries designed by Bronzino are already installed. As new items arrive, they're unpacked by a specialist team who examine them carefully for any damage. The first painting on the wall is, naturally, Cosimo de' Medici. Outside, Florence is preparing for the opening.
Insieme a Cosimo su Firenze regna. Perché sta posando per il pittore.
Inside, the Palazzo Strozzi is ready. Richard Dormant has a preview of the finished exhibition.
This has really been a thrilling experience for me. I've seen, like most of us, Bronzinos in museums around the world, but to see so many brought together, and of every different kind, the great altarpieces that you think couldn't be moved, but have been moved to this exhibition, and of course the portraits, which I think are going to prove to be some of the most popular pictures in the exhibition. One of the things about Bronzino is you feel that his objectivity, his realism, is so absolute that he will not tell you what he thinks of those people, or the people in his pictures. He keeps out of it. He just paints what they are in the dresses they're wearing, but he doesn't put much of himself in the pictures. We sometimes think of Bronzino as a cold, cerebral artist, rather an intellectual artist. I think that one of the great things this exhibition has done is make us see that's absolutely not true when you come to the portraits of children. These are the most enchanting part of the exhibition. All the children of Cosimo de' Medici are here in the exhibition. And this is a particularly interesting one because it shows Bia, his natural daughter. It was painted after Bia's death. We don't quite know how. It could have been from a death mask, or Bronzino, who was a master draftsman, could have been called in by the grieving parents. It just couldn't be more beautiful or more interesting from room to room. It's a very textured exhibition, one that is full of surprises.
When a painting reaches an exhibition, there is a sense of satisfaction, yet also of sadness, for something that has belonged to us for quite some time. Absolutely, absolutely true. We were talking about emotion, the emotion of entering this room, looking at the painting, not even hearing the noise of other people, just seeing the painting.
but it's a great opportunity. You see them now as they were painted.
He uses the light to pick up especially kind of jewels and pearls and tiny threads. And even when you get up close and the tiny little strands of hair that come off the sides of the heads, and the attention to detail is just extraordinary, really fantastic.
I love the way that you look at a painting and it's not just what you see is what you get. You have to study the painting and to always look deeper to find hidden meanings of his work.
The Bronzino exhibits leave us in no doubt of Bronzino's unique genius. Why then did he not take his rightful place among the household names of great art? One answer may lie in the fact that unlike his near contemporaries Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, Bronzino remained in Florence at the Medici court. Most of his paintings stayed there too, a fact that, incidentally, has made this virtually complete exhibition of his known works feasible. His fame, therefore, was contained in an era in which other artists travelled and worked at a much higher profile across Italy and beyond. Bronzino as a person seems even more elusive than his paintings. Possibly he did not seek fame. There is no self-portrait. He does not figure in Giorgio Vasari's painting of great artists surrounding Cosimo, although he is known to have been a court favourite. It's possible that Vasari himself, more influential as a writer than an artist, may have been part of the reason for Bronzino's obscurity.
Most of the artists of the Renaissance, their reputations were based to some degree on what Giorgio Vasari wrote in his Lives of the Artists. And for reasons we simply don't know, he didn't include in that book a full-scale biography of Bronzino, probably because Bronzino was personally modest and didn't want one or didn't like Vasari, we don't really know. But for that reason, he kind of stands outside the history of art.
I think what we see now is a new appraisal of Bronzino. We see Bronzino coming back into fashion. He was in, he was out. Now we've just waited, and now he's having his moment.
Bronzino died in 1572. This was the last fresco commissioned by his patron Cosimo in the church of San Lorenzo, the martyrdom of St. Lawrence. In the church of Santa Croce, there are extravagant memorials to the great artists. But Bronzino is not among them. In the private chapel of the artists in Santissima Annunziata, only a small scratched portrait records Bronzino's existence. His tomb is just across from the Duomo, but the church of San Cristoforo degli Adimari has gone, and Bronzino now lies close to a parking spot for ambulances. For Bronzino, this exhibition will be his most enduring memorial.
I would like people to look at this exhibition not only with the idea of looking at a beautiful artist, but an intellectually complex artist, a humanist who would leave ideas untold in his work, probably because he didn't even want his ideas to become public, yet to remain within an inner circle. This inner circle would use a code to unlock doors on cultural meanings known only by those belonging to the inner circle.
Well, I think that the fact that the only thing that remains of an artist is his art is actually probably all that the artist himself would have wished. So I think that there's no need for too much too much nostalgia and wishing for grand tombs and ornamental doorways. I think that if an artist of any kind leaves art behind, if a poet leaves poetry that moves the soul, I mean, all of us would want to be remembered that way.